Welcome to this week's episode of Let's Talk Shit. We'll be talking to fellow IBD sufferer Crash Stevenson, all about his experience with IBD in life and in the army. Let's get into this. Hi, thank you for talking with me today.
No worries.
Yeah, thank you. Let's get into this. Let's go from the beginning. A lot of people obviously get misdiagnosed. I was misdiagnosed a million times with things that weren't even remotely related to IBD. Just talk me through perhaps what you might have been misdiagnosed with, or whether that be just a gluten intolerance or the wrong type of IBD.
I was originally diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2020. However, upon moving house, so I'm in the military, I moved to a new unit, was transferred to a new IBD team, and the consultant there was questioning me, as he normally would, and he's asked about my MRI results, and I'd never had one. And he says, well, I don't know how you can be diagnosed with Crohn's if you've not had an MRI. So essentially, I had to do another colonoscopy, an MRI, and the long and short of it was that I was misdiagnosed originally, and I have ulcerative colitis.
Oh, wow.
But the intricacies of it, I don't know. I see on the Crohn's Colitis UK page, people saying I've also ulcerative colitis, something on the end of it. I don't know what is that I've got. So yeah, I've now been on azathioprine for about 4 months. That was after coming here. The ironic thing is the medication that was put on for Crohn's obviously didn't work. So from point of diagnosis until azathioprine kicked in, I was without medication, basically. But once azathioprine kicked in, it's been an absolute lifesaver.
Yeah.
What was the next part you were asking?
Yeah, so just sort of obviously, because with the illness, there is that just main one symptom, which, everyone sort of associates with IBD, which is the constantly going to the toilet and needing to go. And that, I think that creates a lot of stigma, obviously, around it because people just associate it with that thing. And I was just sort of wondering from your experience, because obviously you said you're in the military.
Yeah.
How has that provided sort of any stigma around it, or had any sort of ignorance? I'm just going to pull my window too, but you.
So for me, up until I was medicated with azathioprine, the biggest thing for me, and it is that stigma of the urgency, isn't it? You have to go to the toilet very quickly, and let's be honest, sometimes you don't make it. For me, the biggest thing that affected me with needing to go to the toilet was during the night. Up until I was medicated properly, it was a minimum, and I mean a minimum of 4 times, sometimes 7, 8, 9 times. So you think how important sleep is to our everyday lives. I was part of a very high readiness operational unit, which provided medical cover for an entire brigade. And I was going into work absolutely shattered. I had a troop of 35 up to 38 sometimes Marines. That's 35 different personalities, 35 different types of welfare that I've got to look at at the time I was a troop sergeant. And that didn't leave very much time for me, but I was constantly shattered. Which then, constantly shattered, you've got to perform physically as well. So with pretty poor sleep, don't get me wrong, I got through it, but it wasn't comfortable.
No.
But thankfully, now that I am on azathioprine, I am pretty much the way I was before I was diagnosed, which is, it's very strange feeling now, having been poorly for so long. Stigma-wise, I mean, it annoys me. It is very much classed as a hidden disability. And for that reason, people will look at you like you have 3 heads.
Yeah.
Because you look normal. However, You know, if sometimes people have blue badges or they have the can't wait card, or the keys to get into the toilets and that, you know, people think, oh, well, why do they get special treatment and all the rest of it? Thankfully, I've not had that. But yeah, being part of the Crohn's Colitis UK Facebook page, you see it quite often. It's just one of those things that society needs to get over, I think. Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think I found myself a lot of the times, like if I've used a disabled toilet or, had to sort of get in quicker, I feel in my head I go over it of like what I would say and how I would try and persuade people that like I'd actually got a condition, because all I've got, obviously you have those people who have more outward, they present outwardly because they have like a stoma bag, so it's more easy for people to be like, oh, okay, well then you must have something. But then I think sometimes people just, if you can't physically see it, if you can't see like a massive scar all the way up or a stoma, like I said, then it is just a lot of like, well, why are you doing that? Why are you here? Why are you using that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, and again, this is a society problem where, I mean, we could talk about society for, 100 years, but
Yeah.
ultimately what it comes down to is that shift in society from everyone having good intentions and having integrity and being honorable and all the rest of it. And now with so many shitbags in society, if you were to rush to the front of the toilet and be like, listen, I've got a medical condition, I really need to go, people would look you up and down and be like, yeah, all right, jog on.
Yeah, they
It's
just.
one of those things.
Mm.
I'm very much, if I had to go to a disabled toilet, and I have done a couple of times, if I say a couple of times, quite a few times. Um, Luckily, no one has been waiting. I mean, one of my worst nightmares would actually to be having used a disabled toilet because the cubicles and the gents are engaged, and for someone with a visible disability, whether they be amputees or someone in a
Mm.
wheelchair or something like that, to be waiting for me outside.
Mm.
And in my mind, I'm like, and the good thing about society is that on the majority of disabled doors now is signs that say, remember, not all disabilities are visible.
Yeah.
But it's still one of my like, oh, I go outside and there's a person in a wheelchair and I'm like, I've got nothing. Like,
Yeah.
I just hope they understand
Yeah.
if that time ever comes.
I think it's because obviously the way, obviously for so many years, disabled toilets were just something that was, that the classic image for me was like they were for someone in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
Like, and even now I think having a IBD, it's like gives you more greater understanding for that. Like it's not just for someone who, needs assistance, like getting onto the toilet. It's for anyone with an invisible illness that needs that space or needs that like right now.
Yeah.
And I think as well, because people can be impatient as well. If you were to go into a normal toilet, people will just be like knocking or just making, you can hear the comments, and that sort of makes you more panicked as well, I think.
Yeah. I can understand that. My mindset as such now is I actually don't care.
Mm.
If I'm in there and you need, guess what? No pun intended, but tough shit,
Yeah.
you know. And if you want to have words when I come out, by all means. But
Mm.
you'll be put in your place because I do
Yeah.
have a hidden disability, and although I can't prove it to you, I'll,
Yeah.
I'll you know, I'll give you a good chewing out. Put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I always think in my head, what would I say if someone said something? And I think as much as I can think about it, I think it'd be very different to what I actually would say.
Yeah. I think certainly in a lot of things we do in life, well, certainly within the military, you're trained for certain scenarios,
Mm.
and you train and you train and you train, and when that scenario happens, you are meant to react instantly.
Mm.
But I've seen it happen where you prepare for someone to fire at you,
Yeah.
and your reaction should be that you fire a couple of shots off towards where the enemy is firing from, blah blah blah, take cover, etc. And even though you've trained for it, you've got the reptilian part of the brain that is fight, flight, freeze, and you're trained to fight, and some people freeze, and it takes getting used to. But certainly, being in that situation, I'd like to think that people would be understanding. If you were to try and go, I don't know, for example, I've got a medical condition, I'm going to be a while. Hopefully, people will be understanding. I think it's something that generally IBD sufferers do, is that we think worst case scenario all the time.
Yeah.
I certainly did. Before I was medicated properly, I was constantly thinking, right, if I've got to go out with my wife and kids and I have to go out after lunch, I'm either going to have to speed to get to where we're going, or I'm not going to have lunch, so that there's not a possibility that I have to have a bowel movement or that.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, because then at this point, I was starting to really pay attention to what I ate. Not quite keeping food diaries, but going, yesterday I ate this and I'm feeling worse today. So typically, there's nothing actually to worry about. And I find that, so I'm obviously Scottish. I live in the north of England, but my parents live in just north of Edinburgh. And so driving up there was a 5-hour drive, which a lot, when you tell people this that have IBD, they're like, oh my God, and you managed it in one go. My worst case scenario is I have to pull over on the hard shoulder of a busy motorway. In fact, I lie. Worst case scenario is there is a traffic jam and I can't pull over. And I don't even know what I would do. We talk about what we think we would do. I have no idea whether I would do that, or who knows. It's just one of those things. There's only so many things in your control. So by all means, if you have control, then you can plan for it. If you don't, you just have to go with what's going to happen.
Yeah, just hope, have everything crossed, and just hope for the best. Yeah, no, it's very unpredictable, and I think I feel like if people spoke about it more and didn't get so, because it's something that everyone does, like everyone goes to the toilet, but people just shy away from it and won't necessarily speak about it, or be like, oh, I don't want to know about that. But I think when it comes to conditions where the bowel is involved, and not just IBD, like other conditions where the bowel's involved, it needs to be discussed, because otherwise you'll get those people who will just look at you and be like, well, I need the toilet too, so
and that's exactly where stigma comes from, is as a lack of understanding. And what's the correct term? I don't know what the correct term is. I call it main character syndrome.
Yeah.
So when everyone thinks, life is about me and only me, well, I need to go to the toilet too. Well, guess what? You're going to have to wait. But I decided just to be very open and honest about my condition, especially with work colleagues, and even my subordinates. Like I said, I was a troop sergeant. I had 35 Marines under my sort of watchful eye. And certainly the hierarchy were very, very understanding. And within the mess, we have what's known as regimental dinners, and it is very, very regimented. Everyone has specific seats based on rank, etc. And there are relief breaks given. However, there are certain times where you just cannot go. One of them being when the top table, which typically is the commanding officer, the regimental sergeant major, when they are addressing, or someone is, I don't know, reading out a vignette or, some core history, you just don't do it. It's more manners than anything. However, my RSM's dying out, so he was leaving the unit. I had a lovely dinner put on for him. He was giving his speech, and I became acutely aware of how I was starting to feel. I started to get very hot. I could feel that really strange feeling in my stomach, and I just thought, why now? Unfortunately, I wasn't anywhere near the door.
Oh no.
Which was a learning point going forward. At a regimental dinner, I will email whoever's organising it ahead of time and go, look, put me nearest to the door. But this opportunity was, I was 2 tables in on the far side, so I had to walk all the way down, across 2 tables, back up and out. Now, by the time I came back in, everyone was sitting down again, but there was some remarks made as I walked past. These were people that I didn't obviously know.
Okay.
Um, but it was good that there was some senior officers there who essentially had my back. And they had leaned over and gone, look, this is why Crash did that. And they've gone, oh, I see. Right. Well,
Mm.
I
Yeah.
understand then. Um, but yeah, sometimes it is just very, very bad timing.
Yeah.
And we can't help it. That's the thing. I think that's what people think is that, if a normal person, and I use that term loosely, needs to go to the toilet, they can for a long time hold it in.
Mm.
But with IBD sufferers, as soon as you feel that twinge in your stomach that you think you may need to go,
Mm.
it's in your best interest to get
Yeah.
there as soon as
Yeah.
possible.
Definitely.
And certainly, even 9 times out of 10, for most people, it might even just be a bit of wind, but it's not worth even risking it.
No,
You
exactly.
know,
No, I think it is just very much ignorance is bliss for a lot of people. And I just think it is taking that time to, like listen to people talking about it. Like even if someone just listened and sat and listened to this audio recording for however long it is, they would have a greater understanding than they did before. And
yeah.
it's making things like that. So that just sort of is what, just to sort of close, how would you feel? Not feel okay. How would you want people to understand it more? Like, what would you do to help people understand this whole condition more?
That is a good question. Um, I think a lot of it is just about spreading awareness. So
Mm.
I only knew what Crohn's disease was because when I was a young recruit in 2005, long story short, I got injured during training and I was put in a remedial troop. And there was a guy in there who's from Scotland as well. And I asked him why he was in there. And he said, oh, I'm getting kicked out. I'm getting medically discharged because I've got Crohn's disease. And I was
Mm.
like, oh, what's that? And all he told me was, I shit blood. And I'm
Mm.
like, oh, wow. So when this started happening to me, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm gonna get kicked out of the military here.
Mm.
I was 16, 17 years in. And although I would have got a lump sum when I left, I'm so close to getting my pension from the day I leave. I was like,
Yeah.
Jesus. But going back to your question, if more people are aware of it and they don't need to know the ins and outs, but just the basics of, well, if you work with somebody who's IBD and they seem overly tired, it's probably one of a few things. Lethargy naturally comes with it. They could be having a bad night's sleep.
Yeah.
If somebody who's young like you and I, if they're asking you to pick something up for them, it's probably because they have really sore joints. Again, it comes with this, and this is the whole hidden disability thing: is that the symptoms that come with Crohn's and ulcerative colitis,
Mm.
they almost make us sound like we're geriatrics.
Yeah.
The skin condition, the dermatitis, the stiff joints, the rubbish sleep, the not being able to hold stuff in when you're meant to. They make us sound like geriatrics. But I think education with everything is definitely key.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
allowing society to understand more of what we go through is probably the best way in order
Yeah.
for us to be understood as Crohn's and colitis sufferers.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think raising awareness and people just understanding will make a big difference in itself. Um, and I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for willing to be interviewed, and I hope to have more conversations with you in the future.
Yeah, happy days. Well, if you need anything else, just ping me a message, pictures or whatever it is that you require.
Yeah.
Very happy to provide.
Okay. Thank you so
All
much.
right, no worries.